Hey guys, Drifter here. Welcome to Black Ops 2 In-Depth. In today's episode, we're going to be discussing the Ballistic Knife, special secondary weapon, special weapon, whatever you want to call it, stabbing machine. The gameplay that you're going to see is one of the first times that I've ever used the Ballistic Knife. I pretty much just never run this weapon. It's not normally my thing. I'm more of an akimbo guy, but thankfully I'm also the in-depth guy. I know how this weapon works, and I do know how to adapt to it very quickly. You're going to get to see me flank a lot, go on some short sprees, some stabbing frenzies, and some very long shots with the Ballistic Knife projectile. But you're not here to watch my gameplay, you're here about stats, so let's talk about that. The direct impact damage of the Ballistic Knife deals 250 damage. I'm not entirely sure why this is relevant, but you guys really like those damage numbers. That means no matter what you crank the health up to, even if you put it on double health in private match for some reason, it's still going to kill you in one shot. This is always a one-shot kill no matter what you do. I've never heard of anybody surviving a Ballistic Knife hit unless, you hit the riot shield. That's not going to do anything. But it will always kill in one hit. This is the projectile, not the stabby part. The projectile is just always a one-shot kill. The stabbing is also always a one-hit kill. The stabbing should do 150 damage, just like the regular knife. If you do go to private match and you put your health up to 200%, you'll find that it takes 2 stabs to kill. But in normal 100% health, it's always going to be 1 stab to kill, 1 stab in hardcore, 1 shot in hardcore. This is kind of like an insta-gibbing weapon, just so long as you hit people, but hitting people is definitely the hard part. Unfortunately, it has a very slow rate of fire. If you wanted to get technical about it, it's a single shot rate of fire because you have to reload every single time, and that kind of messes up RPM calculations. However, I would say it shoots at about the same speed as the crossbow as the DSR. It's probably about 50-60 RPM. It's very, very slow. Do not miss your projectile shots because it's going to be a long time coming for the next shot. One of the cool things about this is that you do get 102% movement speed. That's right, you actually get bonus movement speed just for having this weapon out and selected. You don't get the movement speed if you put it away. You don't get the movement speed if this is your secondary weapon and you're holding an assault rifle. But when you break out the Ballistic Knife, you actually run 2% faster than your normal. What I like to do, and what I would actually recommend that you do later on in the episode, you'll see that if you stack this with lightweight, you get 109% movement speed because lightweight adds 7% movement speed. 109%, that's almost 10% faster than everything else, and it doesn't seem like a lot, but trust me, this is going to be a big difference, especially against assault rifle users, light machine gun users, shield users, relatively slower people that aren't running lightweight. You are going to run circles around them. They're going to seem painfully slow compared to you. The upcoming segment, we're going to talk about the knifing mechanics in Black Ops 2 and how this compares to the several different kinds of knives. Instead of using raw numbers here, I'm going to use comparative analysis because it makes a little bit more sense this way. The raw numbers will get a little bit overwhelming. This stabs faster than the regular knife, but a little bit slower than the combat knife. The combat knife is the fastest stabbing, fastest animation killing in the game. However, the Ballistic Knife is faster than your regular knife, and it's a little bit slower than the combat knife. You're not really losing anything by stabbing with the Ballistic Knife. Anything, it's a gain over normal. Just the combat knife is actually very crazy when it comes to stabbing, and it stabs very fast. The next knifing mechanic that has its own section of code is the charge range, or the dash range, or the auto-aim attack range. That's the range at which your knife is going to automatically lock onto the body and stab them. That's why when the game is a little bit laggy, you see crazy things like people knifing you sideways or backwards, or when somebody is just barely out of range, it seems like you're not going to hit them, you knife them, and then you very quickly dash up and stab them. The charge time, or charge speed, however you want to look at it, is the same for the regular knife and for the combat knife. They both lunge at the person in the same amount of time at the same speed. However, the Ballistic Knife and the tactical knife are faster than those relatively normal. That's our normal baseline for this comparison. The Ballistic Knife is faster than the regular knife when it comes to charging up to stab people. However, it's slower than the tactical knife. The tactical knife is actually absurdly fast when it comes to charge time. It basically sends you across the map like a laser when you go to stab people. So again, the Ballistic Knife is not the best in any of these options, but it is pretty much middle of the pack or slightly better than your average. There is no situation in which the Ballistic Knife is actually the worst or bad at anything. Though, if you're talking about things that are bad, the knifing range in Black Ops 2 is very short. It's about 1.5 meters, give or take a little bit. This is shorter than any previous Call of Duty game. If I'm not mistaken, Modern Warfare 3 would have been closer to about 1.8, 1.9 meters. Black Ops 2, it's 1.5 meters. Very low. The lowest in any game. We have lower charge ranges, lower auto-aim values. You have to be much closer to the enemy to hit. Knifing is a challenge in this game. It's not Modern Warfare 2 where you can run around with commando and knife people from 20 feet away. It's the opposite of that. You are just very weak with a knife. Or not weak, you have extremely limited range, and you need to keep that in mind. You need to be very close to somebody before you do try to stab them. One of the more surprising things about the ballistic knife is that you actually appear on radar when firing. I thought surely you're not going to show up on radar because I know the crossbow puts you on the radar, but I was thinking ballistic knife, it's a handheld knife weapon. There's no way I'm going to show up on the radar. I don't show up on the radar when I click and stab people. However, I do show up on the radar when I shoot my projectile. Shooting the projectile is going to make you show up on the radar, so please be aware that when you shoot it, you need to be able to move or flank because people are going to notice that dot and they're going to turn around and hose you down. Just don't miss with your projectile and be very, very mobile. Ghost won't help you and there's no way to kind of silence it. The arc range on the ballistic knife is actually kind of punishing. It begins to arc a little bit after about 20 meters or so. This is going to be closer to the minimum damage range on your submachine guns. It's got a pretty good range with no arc where you can point it pretty much straight ahead. However, after 20 meters, you're going to be losing what I would say any sort of reasonable arc. You're not just going to be able to point and shoot. And it starts to arc very, very heavily after about 35 meters. If you're going with long shots for this weapon, you need to keep in mind that it has a very, very heavy arc. If you're going for across the map shots, you're going to need to aim 20, 30, 40 degrees over their head because it's going to arc and come straight back down. The arcing is very heavy on the ballistic knife, and you need to keep that in mind. It works best in close quarters combat and medium range and that sort of stuff. Unlike the crossbow, this is not a long range special weapon. Also, unlike the crossbow, it actually reloads very, very quickly. It reloads in 1.1 seconds, and the reload cancel time is 0.3 seconds. That's where I got my estimated fire rate of 50 RPM or 60 RPM from, because that's about the same as the amount of delay between the shots on the ballista or the SV or the DSR. However, if you reload cancel, you do have the potential to shoot this much, much faster. You could get it up to something like 90 RPM if you reload cancel and shoot very, very quickly. But the timing on that's a little bit difficult, and I imagine that most players are just going to wait for the animation to finish, and you need to time your shots and make them count. You just don't want to be spamming them about everywhere. The trick to the ballistic knife is to always flank. And when you're running this class, you always want to flank. You want to be coming up behind enemies, beside enemies. You really want to avoid one-on-one engagements. Maybe if you can push them somewhere in a hallway on a guy that you know has a weak SMG or not a shotgun or something like that, it's okay to charge in their face and stab them. But the goal is that you want to be very, very fast. You want to have more sprint time, more run speed than anybody else on the map. You want to run up beside them, behind them, stab them, any of these sort of things. You see me going for some of these cowboy quick draw kind of in their face gameplay here, but that's because I do YouTube and the pressure is you always want to have that good gameplay, and it's not always seen as the best gameplay when you stab people in the back, but that's really what you want to be doing with this weapon. You want to go for flanking people, for surprising people. You don't want to do 1v1 because you will almost always lose the 1v1 when you have a knife. You also need to know when to stab and when to shoot. This was the hardest part for me to learn when I did this, is I always just wanted to shoot. I wanted to run up and shoot the ballistic knife and then go for the stab. But what would happen is, in the time it took for me to stop and then shoot the projectile and then put it away and reload it and then go for the stab, I would get mowed down. Whereas when I was in a close range situation, what I could do is just charge all the way, don't worry about the projectile, and just go for the stab. That works much, much better. It's kind of a tricky thing. I say anything under about 5 or 6 meters, just rush, just go straight for the stab. Usually anything under about 10 meters, I'm probably just going to throw a grenade and go for the stab. I don't actually go for the shots anymore until they're 15, 20 meters away, and it goes in a straight line. It's 100% accurate all the time. I can pick off snipers and campers and people that are sitting still, but it is a skill shot. It's difficult to do. If somebody doesn't see you, if there's a multiple group of people, preferably at medium range, it is amazing to just sneak up behind them and pop and reload and pop and reload and pop and reload and clean them all out. It's really, really fun, but you do need to play with this yourself. You need to get used to it. It's going to take a couple games. Just know when to stab and when to shoot, and it's just all about your playstyle and your feelings. But I do have a class build for you that's going to help you with this. I recommend using lightweight. Always use lightweight with this because you want to be as fast as possible. This is going to make your melee charge time faster, your auto aim range faster, and it's going to kind of suck people into your knife a little bit faster when you're faster. Always use lightweight. You want that 109% movement speed. I run scavenger, so every time I stab somebody, I get back my tactical grenades, my lethal grenade, which in this case I was just running a tomahawk. It's a purely stabbing class, but if you had something else, that would be good too. And I also am able to get back all of my ballistic knife, I don't know what you call them, projectiles, little shooting knives. I don't have the name for them, but every single time you kill somebody and you pick up that packet, it's going to reload your equipment, which you're really, really going to need. Fast hands is also important in this one because you're going to want to deploy your grenades and your equipment very, very quickly. Fast hands also helps if you decide to pick up a weapon or scavenge a weapon, because many knifers do pick up a weapon and put it on their back for when they're really desperate. This will allow you to pick it up very quickly, and you won't have to worry about fumbling with it or bumbling with it when somebody's charging at you. Perhaps more important than fast hands are my bottom two perks. Dexterity is very important because you want to recover super fast after sprinting, both so that you can stab faster or so you can shoot your projectile faster. It has to do with your speed in climbing and mantling, also very important. Ladder climbing important. Perhaps most important is dexterity helps you recover faster from knifing. It actually helps you knife faster. Your knife recovery speed is decreased when you're running dexterity. Very important on that one if you're taking on multiple targets. Lastly, extreme conditioning, which we've already discussed in previous episodes, is going to be very important because that gives you double sprint time. That's double flanking, twice as far around the map. Going to be extremely important for sneaking up behind people. Unfortunately, unlike the combat knife, the ballistic knife doesn't get that extra 50% run speed, sprint time, but this definitely does help, and it lets you get all over the place. This is what I use, and you want to pick one tactical and one lethal of your choice and just run around like this. Radar and orbital VSATs, they're going to be your enemy, but unfortunately you show up on the radar when you shoot the ballistic knife anyway, so running Ghost probably wouldn't help all that much. Well guys, that's all for this episode. I hope that you enjoyed it, and I hope that you learned something useful. If you'd like to check out my previous episode on the crossbow, you can click the box on the left. If you'd like to check out my next episode on the assault shield, you can click the box on the right. It'll open in a new window when it goes live. As always, if you enjoyed the content, don't forget to like and subscribe. Drifter out.